through the update. Minister Kubai.
I think this podium is a bit of a challenge every time with my iPad. I'll try and hold it so that it's easy. Thanks, Prawili. Firstly, let me acknowledge my colleagues, Minister Kachalia, Minister of Police, Minister Chabeni, Minister in the Presidency, and we are joined by the DG's lead DG, which is DG Makode, and then we've got two colleagues who are joining us. We'll introduce them as well. But let me firstly just acknowledge, join the President in passing the condolences to the family, friends, and the sporting communities after the passing of Jaden Adams and Lukobo Makwetini, who passed away, our sporting champions. And I guess we join all sports-loving people in the country in passing those condolences to their families, their clubs, and the entire nation, and may their souls rest in peace. Pardon me, I've got a bit of, I think I'm starting to have flu just this morning. So if I do in the between have to blow my nose, you'll pardon me. Thank you very much once more for honoring our invitation to the IMC media briefing and for your consistent, balanced coverage of the current migration developments and the associated events that are unfolding in this regard. It is important that South Africans and the citizens of our continent and the world over get the true picture of what is going on in South Africa today, including the concerted efforts that government is making to deal with irregular migration in our country. We have called this media briefing to give feedback and progress report on the work that the IMC is doing in implementing the 5-point plan on managing migration and as announced by the President on the 7th of June, 2026. As a reminder, the 5-point plan includes cracking down on violation of our immigration laws, securing our borders, strengthening our immigration system, closing gaps in laws and policies on migration, and working closely with our continental counterparts in managing migration. In implementing this plan, we are striving to achieve an orderly and regular migration which is mindful and sensitive to the concerns raised by our people while observing human rights and dignity of all people in our country, irrespective of their citizenship and immigration status. In this regard, we have noted ongoing public concerns and heightened tensions linked to migration-related matters in parts of the country. Media reports, both domestically and internationally, indicate that there are still groups of protesters who conduct searches around homes and businesses that are suspected to house undocumented immigrants. This is illegal, and members of our community who are part of these activities are warned to refrain from this and from this conduct. And law enforcement agencies continue to work in this regard in identifying those who are appearing on those social media and the reports. Government reiterates that the management of migration, border management, deportation, and facilitated repatriation is exclusively the responsibility of the state, and no individual or group has the authority to take the law into their own hands or to intimidate, threaten, or unlawfully remove any person from any community. Our law enforcement authorities will not hesitate to act against those who continue to conduct these unlawful searches and identity checks. The work of the IMC is coordinated through the following work streams, which provide regular progress reports to the IMC through the NetJoins: law enforcement, border management, legal and regulatory, economic sectors, humanitarian welfare and social sectors, international relations, systems development and data integration, and communication and stakeholder management. You'd remember, these are the work streams that we have highlighted, and work continues along those work streams. Let me give progress report in terms of where we are today. And we start with law enforcement. Since the establishment of the IMC, we have undertaken various law enforcement, immigration, and labor inspections activities that are aimed at removing all forms of irregular migration, including arresting of those who are aiding and abetting undocumented foreign nationals. I firstly wish to commend our SAPS and Interpol for the sterling work that they have done this week in the arrest of Mr. Mkanyisi Ndodana Chuma, a fugitive wanted for murder of his wife and 2 children in the UK. He arrived according to our movement control systems at OR Tambo International Airport on the 5th of July, 2026 from Britain. Once we have received the alert from Interpol, we acted swiftly from a multidisciplinary team conducting tracing, and the suspect was arrested in Kensington, Johannesburg. At the time he went through OR Tambo, he had not yet been flagged by British authorities. So if he had been flagged, he would not have entered the country. He will be extradited to the UK once I have signed all the extradition documents and requests as required by the law in my capacity as Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. We are informed that the teams are working quite hard around the clock so that the extradition requests are done and the paperwork is done in time. The IMC welcomes again the continued work on law enforcement agencies under the NetJoins framework. And this we emphasize because we want to ensure that our country remains safe and also all laws within our borders are respected. And this country should not be seen as a safe haven for criminals, but also for those who are here should not conduct activities that are unlawful that actually impact on the integrity and the image of our country. As of 8 July 2026, 205 cases have been registered. 350 persons have been arrested, 69 cases were pending investigations, and 112 cases were on the court roll in relation to incidents linked to unlawful conduct, intimidation, incitement, and related offenses. Government will continue to act firmly against criminality, vigilantism, public violence, intimidation, discrimination, and attempts to conduct informal enforcement of immigration-related concerns. We have continued to facilitate the return of foreign nationals to their countries, either through deportation or assisted voluntary repatriation. I wish to differentiate between these two related but fundamentally different concepts: repatriation and deportation. Repatriation refers to the act of returning a person to their country of origin. In terms of international law, repatriation must strictly be voluntary. 1951 UN Convention and its 1967 protocols require us to observe that. The repatriation process is voluntary and requesting countries bear the primary responsibility for transportation costs and management of logistics in this regard. So those who are saying that they want to leave as they approach their embassies, they are correct because that's the process. And it's done by their embassies because we are receiving questions about that. Why are people in front of their embassies? It's because it's voluntary repatriations. On deportation, deportation is a formal lawful process by which a government expels a non-citizen from its country. Section 34 of the Immigration Act makes this specifics. Under normal circumstances, the responsibility of the host country only involves the verification and issuance of orders to leave. However, in certain circumstances, the need does arise for financial, and humanitarian assistance, which is handled on a case-by-case basis. Under the current arrangements, government through various departments, municipalities, and entities is funding most of the repatriation and deportation operations, including transport, security, and accommodation-related costs. The government commenced with assisted repatriation process following challenges with regards to the Malawi government not being able to discharge its responsibility to sufficiently fund the buses for repatriation from 14 June 2026. On the 26th June 2026, we reported through a media briefing that 15,162 Malawian nationals have been repatriated. We have seen a tremendous increase on the number of foreign nationals that have either been deported or repatriated today. As of close of business of the 11th July 2026, a total of 53,449 foreign nationals have been processed for either deportation and repatriation, which is dominated by the following. Malawians are actually at the point of 80%, followed by the Zimbabweans and Mozambicans. Repatriations to countries beyond SADC amounts to 2,615 and include the returns to Kenya with a total of 431, Nigerians 1,159, Republic of Congo 86, Uganda 939. So those were done through air in terms of arranging for their air travel by their country of origin. In addition to the repatriation, the normal immigration deportation process continued. So this is work that happens month to month. For the month of June alone, 2026, this is where we're doing deportation, arresting them, finding them in communities, either through Operation Shanyela or through the enforcement by Department of Labor and Department of Home Affairs. Out of those, for the month of June 2026, we have a total of 4,898 that have been deported. Malawi nationals, 1,929. Zimbabweans, 1,384. Mozambique nationals, 1,200. Lesotho, 342. And lastly, for the period of 14 June 2026 to 8 July, a total of 2,801, which composes of 910 Malawi nationals, Zimbabweans 903, Mozambicans 755, Lesotho 187, which have been confirmed for deportation. You remember with the deportation, they must appear before a court with a magistrate processing them across the country, and therefore these are the numbers in terms of the deportation. As announced during the last media briefing by the IMC on the 26th, the temporary repatriation processing center has been established in Musina and began its operations on the 1st of July 2026. More than 20,000 foreign nationals have been repatriated through the TRPC, which is Temporary Repatriation Processing Center. The repatriation center utilized in eThekwini and Umsunduzi officially closed on the 30th of June 2026, and all Malawian nationals who had assembled prior to the 30th were transferred to the TRPC. And this includes those that were at the Musina Refugee Center, Reception Center, and Musina Showgrounds, who were transferred by the 3rd of July 2026. So we took a decision to de-establish across the country and move everybody to one center, and that happened, and we were able to process them quite faster and also in terms of a coordinated effort. Repatriation process are undertaken at the TRPC. However, the process starts at a point where foreign nationals assemble prior to transportation to the TRPC. The DHA, which is Home Affairs, working together with municipalities, various embassies, law enforcement agencies, and other NGOs, provide transport services for all nationals nationwide to the TRPC. The TRPC in Musina has the capacity for accommodating, it was built to accommodate about 20,000 people and is serviced by the following stakeholders. And we want to appreciate the partnership and the collaboration between various stakeholders, both in government and outside government. The Limpopo provincial government was requested to assist us in clearing the site because it was a bush. So we had to first debush the site. It's a it's a government-owned land under Department of Public Works. And we identified that so that we don't have to be seeking permission from anyone else because it's a state land, but it was in the middle of nowhere. Those who have been there would have seen. And we took a decision that we'll use that piece of land, debush it. It took about 2 days for that to be or 3 days to be depushed between 27 to 29 June. And we'd like to commend the work that was done swiftly in that regard. We then requested the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure nationally to assist us in assembling the tents, the generators, ablution facilities, the fence, the entirety of the infrastructure there that did not exist. And I must say it's commendable that the team, working in a very coordinated and collaborative work, they were able to assemble that facility in 4 days. And that shows that when government works together, focused, we are able to achieve, and the state capacity does show that we are able to respond to the demands when we are called to. Musina local municipality assisted us with providing health inspectors who were able to ensure that the food parcels that were coming through are actually in compliance. They assisted us in the registration of vendors, supported us with the fire department, sourcing of local service providers in terms of ensuring that there's cleaning services, etc. there. Net joints and prof joints worked in terms of crackdown on law enforcement and coordination of foreign nationals under distress or displaced through municipalities. The Home Affairs Department, project coordination for the repatriation, documentation services, verification across and including fingerprinting, capturing and issuing of the body-ready receipt. So the Department of Home Affairs have been the lead department in ensuring that the facility works and actually is under their care as well. Embassies, their work and responsibility have been the provision of a collective passport. You'd remember these people do not have documents, and therefore for them to leave the border, they've got to have a level of document that registers them. So they were able to provide the temporary documents so that they can be repatriated. In terms of that, Malawi provided collective passport, Zimbabwe provided a repatriation certificate, and then temporary documents were provided by Mozambique, which the individuals were departing through Libombo border. Because some of them, those who had documents, they had actually even expired. SAPS provided criminal records verification because we had to verify if those individuals had criminal records or they were wanted. So there were quite a number, about 3 that so far that I'm aware of, that were identified as people who had to appear before courts, and they were taken back so that they can be able to appear before courts, and therefore they were taken in custody. So they did that. They ensured that we have all those cases that are verified. Mr. Sheriff Maulana from Malawi was arrested for murder case and reported in Chatsworth. Mr. Ncube Marshal Vusimusi from Zimbabwe wanted for armed robbery, arrested at a point in Durban, a case number that was provided. So we were able to link even their case number. They are processing through our court systems. And in the drive-through as well, drive-in center in KwaZulu-Natal, another suspect was wanted actually for rape and was nabbed and was actually taken back into custody. So police have also opened a capable homicide case after a driver of a bus known as Morris from Zimbabwe died on the N1 road after the Petrol's truck stop. The bus was not commissioned by the South African government for the record purposes. We need to state that, and a case number that has been reported in Musina station. And this is why IMC has insisted that verification and all this has to happen within government processes, because when we even repatriate, we do it to ensure that the drivers everybody is actually done within law, there's compliance with the law, and we actually are able to avoid fatalities. Health team provided health provision, 24-hour clinic at the facility. We had health inspectors, emergency services that were providing, and the clinic had actually managed to assist about 402 patients with various ailments, with other referred to 9 referrals were made to the Musina Hospital. The Provincial Department of Health is still conducting an inquest in the death of a Malawian national, Mr. Kasim Jafati, born 1979, who died on his way to Malawi just before the bus reached Bay Bridge, port of entry, and was forced to return to the center. And we pass our condolences to the Malawian government again and to the family. The case was reported at Musina Police Station in terms of the cause of death, and the investigation continues. Want to also thank the NGOs, it's Al-Mdad Foundation, Africa Muslim Agency, Musina Reform Church, Mahlasedi Foundation, Gift of the Givers, for provision of meals, water, pampers, food, milk, sanitary towels were made through the establishment of the center there. But we want to thank also SACC and various religious bodies that were actually there to provide support to the people who were on the site, but also as part of monitoring the work that government has done. From the business community, want to thank MTN and Vodacom for provision of temporary towers for connectivity at the site to ensure efficient processing through our systems and humanitarian aid provided at the site. But additional more, MTN donated 14 million through the NGO of Gift of the Givers, so that we are able to have the meals provided to the communities who were there. So I can safely say, since we started this process, government has not paid for a single meal. And the people who have been provided there have been able to get breakfast and lunch and evening supper. And this has been done through the NGOs who came through in terms of the support. I want to also acknowledge UN bodies, international organization, IOM, UNHCR, UNICEF, who continued in terms of their observation on human treatment of foreign nationals and welfare of children, including advice and guidance on best practices for the repatriation process. Further, these organizations are providing valuable technical advice on the repatriation support and processes. The South African National Defence Force, who actually made sure that we have water on site and water purification services, that actually, because as I said, it was a bush that had to be debushed, and therefore they provided, there was no water connectivity, and SNDF came handy in this regard. The Department of Social Development with regards to social, psychological services and intervention of unoccupied minors that we found within this process. So this is work that is collaborative across, and many more will continue to provide information about their work. We thought we should acknowledge this partnership, this department, multi-departmental and multi-stakeholder engagements and work in the facility of Musina, which actually was the first time that government set up such a structure. While government continued to facilitate lawful repatriation and deportation, we have noted that scores of people continue to arrive across various centers to take advantage of the repatriation process. These uncoordinated arrivals are putting a strain on our local communities who reside in the proximity of the centers, and they pose significant risks of health hazard and outbreaks. In this regard, we have put emergency measures to respond to these spontaneous arrivals and have asked our local authorities to ensure an orderly management of the situation. We will be deploying more resources in this regard, including accelerated transport arrangements to ensure that we clear the pavements and public spaces that are continuously occupied by these arrivals. We call on foreign missions and relevant authorities in the fraternity of repatriation countries to continue working with us in this regard and to plead with their respective nationals to follow established protocols in the repatriation process. I must indicate that the IMC had a small task team that worked on this, and they actually worked through our disaster management area or organized structure to understand how people can assemble. And we're saying when the need arises, the assembling points will be are communicated to the municipality so that we ensure it's coordinated, it's understood, and it's even from our side in terms of our operations, the net joints will understand and would know how to coordinate that. There's a notable decline on the number of repatriation from a peak of 4,850 on the 5th of July 2026 to 1,139 on the 11th July 2026. As such, we are in discussion with relevant authorities and stakeholders about the process of scaling down our efforts and deployment of resources for this process in the Musina in particular. We envisage a phased scaling down of the process, which will not negatively impact or compromise both the deportation and repatriation processes we are undertaking. The reality is that these temporary measures, which are costly to our fiscus, were never meant to be permanent. The state, however, remains with the legal obligation to continuously deport those who are found to have transgressed the Immigration Act. As such, a total of 15,398 foreign nationals have been deported between the 1st April 2026 and 30 June 2026. During the same period, 2,519 joint law enforcement operations were undertaken, and we will continue to do those operations. To report on the work that has been done by dedicated immigration courts, we established dedicated courts for immigration at Sherwood at the beginning of the process of deportation. This included 7 dedicated courts in eThekwini, while one was virtual with a link to Sherwood to process deportation. In the period between 1 June 2026 until 9 July 2026, courts in the KwaZulu-Natal have finalized 2,640 immigration cases for deportation. The majority were from the special courts in eThekwini with a performance of 2,173. I wish to commend the Chief Magistrate in eThekwini, Ubabungubane, in that area, and the prosecutors and all court officials who worked long hours together and with Legal Aid Board South Africa, who actually worked long hours and including within the holiday in June 16, that they actually worked without taking leave or off to ensure that they support their own government in this work. The re-establishment of court at Lindela will ensure that deportation from Lindela Repatriation Center will be expedited. The work to providing designed more offices or designated more offices for the court is at advanced stage and will be completed within this month. You would remember when we went there, the room was not looking like a court and therefore needed to be re-established, and that work we expect it to be completed this month. Similarly, work to establish a court that handles, amongst others, immigration cases is advancing at the airports together with the teams. This will be at the Airports Company of South Africa premises in terms of OR Tambo. The work is advanced, the site has been identified, has been agreed upon. Now, internal processes within the Department of Justice are being taken so that this can be done. The process of setting up this court is envisaged to take about 3 months for it to come to fruition. Progress update on border management. The borderline work stream under the leadership of Minister of Defense and Ministerial Veterans, Minister Motshekga, has developed an implementation plan that provides an authoritative reference for the execution of the borderline infrastructure. It integrates the program timeline, task establishment, phased implementation schedule, provisional cost estimates, and risk register into a single document. The plan establishes formal task assigned between the 3 implementing organizations, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, the Defense Works Formation, and the South African Army Engineer Corps. and provides a management framework for delivery across the next 3 financial years. The IMC will be presenting a detailed business case to the Minister of Finance for the funding of the borderline infrastructure and present the final plans to the next cabinet in this month. So that work, we have said as the IMC, the meeting with the finance team must happen this month, so that at the end of the month, I think the cabinet is on the 28th, we are reporting this matter to cabinet so that a decision can be taken, and we're looking forward to that. This is extensive work that has been done. Progress update on legal and regulatory environment. The progress of drafting a new unified and harmonized legal framework for regulating citizenship immigration regulation is underway. The DHA intends to gazette the bill for public comments during this year. The Department of Transport has initiated the process of drafting regulations which are aimed at stopping the misuse of the traffic regulation registration numbers as a form of identity. We are also attending to various litigation matters that have either been decided by the judiciary or still on the court roll. They include a litigation against the state brought by the Lawyers for Human Rights in which they demanded urgent intervention, protection measures, and disclosures of plans to prevent xenophobic violence associated with the purported 30 June 2026 ultimatum in KwaZulu-Natal and the rest of the country. The legal action was launched despite the meeting that the IMC had with the Lawyers for Human Rights prior to the set date above. The update is that the court dismissed the agency in Part A of the application, and Part B has been postponed sine die. Constitutional Court decision in the matter of Director General, Department of Home Affairs and others versus Iran Kunda and others, another. This judgment gives the department binding authority to refuse to receive or process second application dressed up as such placed or changed circumstances claims, and proceed with deportation once internal review, appeal, and subsequent judicial review of the first application have been exhausted. Again, this judgment of the Concord is being challenged by it was a challenge by UCT Refugee Clinic with the same applicant Amina, Iran Kunda, and others. The applicant failed in the Constitutional Court May 2026 and has now launched a new application on the same facts, challenging the Refugee Act and insisting she is entitled to a Section 22 permit. On Friday, 10 July 2026, in an urgent court, Judge Henny dismissed her Part A interim interdict application. She is not entitled to a Section 22 permit and has to go the route of good cause, which then Part B is still to be determined later. These are legal matters that continue, that the legal work stream works on. Constitutional Court decision in the matter of Scalabrini, Center of Cape Town, and others versus the Minister of Home Affairs and others, which Constitutional Court declared Section 21(1)(b) of the Refugee Act 1998 unconstitutional in that it was irrational and serves no legitimate government purpose. That the Section 4(1)(f) and (h), (i), and 21(1)(b) of the Refugee Act 1998 confer discretionary power without setting out sufficient criteria or factors to guide their exercise, and that the operation of Section 4 of the Refugee Act 1998 excludes a merit-based assessment of the danger an asylum seeker faces in his or her country of origin, with the result that the impunged section violates the principle of non-refoulement. In a nutshell, this judgment directs the Department of Health to adjudicate every asylum application irrespective of illegality or illegal entry or stay in the country by the applicant. These are part of the work that will continue to be analyzed, its impact on our legal and our reforms. We currently have another court judgment, a court case where applications are seeking to challenge the powers of the magistrates in determining deportation in the Western Cape. And myself and the Minister of Home Affairs are cited, and we will be working, our teams are working on that court challenge litigation and will reflect on it and respond to it. The Association of Communication and Technology has advised that mobile network operators are ready to comply with the 1st July 2026 in respect to stricter regulation, enhanced customer registration measures, and compliance regarding SIM card registrations. The MNOs have written to myself as the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, informing me that they have started with the implementation of the registration measures to ensure compliance pertaining to SIM card registration. And this work will be monitored. They have requested a meeting, which we'll definitely honor so that we can listen to them. Registration of informal and micro businesses is continuing. To date, more than 400,000 businesses have been captured on the DSBD Connect system, and the implementation of the plan will increase the number of registered businesses many times. DSDB, SALGA, and COCTA are finalizing the project implementation plan, and that will continue to work in this area. We note that this is one of the areas that South Africans are raising as a concern. In the case of the Department of Small Business and Development, the net joins had instructions specifically require the department to share the database containing details of spaza shops, informal and micro businesses, so that this can be monitored in terms of compliance, but also for law enforcement purposes. And the department is in the process of packaging the required data in the DSDB Connect and in the innovation portal data platforms, and will be shared with us and the net joins in this regard. The data will be sourced from other data sources from various portfolios, as well as ensuring that the partners in the ecosystem also complies in providing such information. This will assist us with the complaints about illegal immigrants operating spazas, but also in terms of law enforcement, ensuring that those who are operating within the small business and informal sector are actually within compliant with our laws. Progress update on humanitarian welfare and social sectors. We have noted some concerns from various quarters regarding the humanitarian situation, especially at the Musina Temporary Repatriation Center, which I think are not quite correct. The IMC emphasizes that government's approach is both firm but also humane. Emergency relief remains a civil mandate, and the state has no obligation relating to the right to life, access to healthcare. The state has an obligation relating to the right to life, access to healthcare, food, water, and social security, and the protection of children remains critical. We can confirm that this temporary facility arrangement does provide appropriate shelter, water, sanitation, food, dignity packs, security, child protection, and coordinated transport support where required. So we want to emphasize there's not been even a single day where the South African government has violated its obligation in terms of human rights. South Africa acknowledges that migration is a regional challenge that requires coordinated diplomatic engagement. For this reason, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation will continue engaging various countries, SADC, and the foreign ministries of affected countries to coordinate repatriation protocols, share operational information, and ensure that action taken are consistent with regional commitments and mutual assistance arrangements. DECO will provide regular factual briefings to foreign missions to prevent and counter misinformation and disinformation. Government appreciates the initiative by several African countries, including Nigeria, Ghana, and Malawi, on repatriating their citizens from South Africa. Government is actively cooperating with them to facilitate the safe, orderly, and voluntary repatriation of citizens. And I must highlight in this regard that we are currently, we had to submit a report to the AU Human Rights Commission as a country in terms of our work, and this is coordinated by Department of DECO, and the lead department is Justice, and that we can safely say the work continues in this regard. Progress update on communication and stakeholder management. We have continued with our engagement with various stakeholders on our approach for managing migration. The following engagements since our briefing were undertaken. On the 25th, I don't think we reported on this one in the last IMC briefing. The IMC met with Siafana Sonke Action Campaign in terms of, this is NGOs that asked to meet with us in terms of the issue. We then did the media briefing on the 26th. On the 27th June, the president hosted a meeting with kings and queens. On the 27th of June, the IMC met with the premier and the executive in terms of explaining the TRPC in Musina and the operations thereof. Again, on the 28th, the president met with King Misizulu of the Zulu nation. On the 29th, the IMC met with the South African Council of Churches and in terms of explaining our work, continue to interact, and where we needed the support. Again, on the 29th, the president met with the leaders, as it was reported last time, of the organizers who had asked to meet with the president and engage with the president. Again, in terms of the 29th June and 2 July, the IMC ministers conducted oversight visits to the TRPC. Similarly, the provincial government sent a delegation that joined the visit. On the 2nd, the ministers' IMC visited the borderline as part of its evaluation, but also from the point of the Department of Police, in responding to the complaints that were received that people are walking house to house demanding passports and documents. The Department of Police met with all the CPF across the country to be able to gain information. These are community policing forum, where they were gaining information about what is happening in which community and also working in partnership with them. On 7 to 8, the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee conducted oversight visit to the TRPC and Beitbridge. During this visit, the Portfolio Committee engaged with both government and non-government stakeholders, including the UN agencies and consular representatives who were on site from Malawi and Zimbabwe. As I conclude, the IMC knows that 29 planned gatherings linked to migration were recorded nationally on the 9th July 2026 and were reported as peaceful with no injuries, no arrest, damage, or unrest reported. These gatherings were monitored by the South African Police Service. Government commends communities that exercise their constitutional rights, peaceful protest, while reminding all members of the public that freedom of expression and assembly must always be exercised within the law and must never be used to promote violence, discrimination, or hatred. South Africa remains committed to enforcing its immigration laws, strengthening border management, protecting communities, combating crime, and upholding the dignity and rights of all people. The IMC urges the public to report criminal activities, threats, intimidation, extortion, incitement or attacks on the law enforcement authorities, and to refrain from sharing unverified information that fuel fear or tension. Again, we want to commend the police, law enforcement agencies on the raids that they continue to do. This is under organized crime work in terms of illegal mining. And you remember one of the work streams, it's in the economy, and that deals with illicit activities in that regard. So want to commend and will monitor that area. Finally, the IMC wishes to express gratitude to the business sector in Musina, most importantly to appreciate the support received from the following non-governmental organizations that I've listed earlier: the Al-Imdad Foundation, Muslim Reform Churches, Mahlasedi Foundation, Africa Muslim Agencies, Gift of the Givers, South African Council of Churches, and further appreciate corporates who have come through, MTN and Vodacom for their support, both the cities of eThekwini and Cape Town and the Western Cape Provincial Government that have provided bus transportation for those in distress outside the embassies of Zimbabwe and Malawi. The city of Johannesburg made referrals to the Department of Home Affairs, while the subs in Gauteng in particular provided transport to Lindela Holding Facility for the Malawian nationals to be transported to the repatriation center. We also appreciate the support from the Department of Transport that has been coordinating the exit and the transportation, and making sure that they support the work of the IMC as part of the IMC. As you remember, last time we had indicated that they have provided, they've been added into the IMC. So you can start seeing the work that is there added into the work. Going forward, we will be continuing with our stakeholder engagement. We've received again other requests for meetings. Once they've been confirmed, we will communicate those, but also the oversight will continue. The work by the DMs in terms of inspections will continue, and law enforcement agencies will continue. So we want to reiterate that this IMC was not meant for the 30th. As we said, there are plans. The 5 priorities by the president is an instruction to us as the IMC to implement those reforms, to implement those programs, and to report monthly to cabinet. And we've been doing so since we started. So this month again, we'll go back to cabinet with the update of the IMC. I must indicate that the IMC now, the work streams will meet. So we're meeting bi-weekly as the IMC, so that the 1 week is the meeting of the work streams to ensure work happens, and all of them then can report to the IMC on the 2nd week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, in your capacity as the chairperson of the IMC, for the comprehensive report back update on what government has done so far. Quite comprehensive indeed. Colleagues, the statement for those who have joined us for the first time, the statement is available. My colleagues Ishmael and Vanessa can share the statement with your good selves. Colleagues, we now get into the Q&A session. The drill is as follows. You raise your hand, or by indication of hand, I will note and recognize your hand, and then you introduce yourself, also the media house that you represent. Let us go for it. Let me note your hand. I'll note the hand. I will note the hand. I will note the hand. So it's 4 hands. I recognize them in that order, which means it starts with you, and then it will be the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. And may you wait for, then we start this side. We start there. On the gentleman. Ishmael, this side. The gentleman, yes. You wait to be given the microphone. Let's go for it, my brother.
My name is Dorian Alexander from Al Jazeera Digital. What I would like to ask the esteemed panel is, who is policing the police? And to create context is, there are reports from our people on the ground that the police are in the vicinity full view. And these vigilante groups are entering private properties even after the developments in the courts. So who is policing the police, and who is policing these vigilante groups?
Thank you, Ishmael, the second is.
Selena Rosibata from ENCA. My question is similar to my colleagues, especially because even just this week, we saw more protests unfolding, particularly in Alexandra, and visually, we are watching the police just watching these groups, literally pushing down gates, demanding IDs, demanding papers from these from some foreign nationals, and destroying property. And the police are doing absolutely nothing. They are watching these incidences unfold. So exactly what kind of a coordinated effort is happening within law enforcement? Is it just to accompany these people and ensure that they don't kill anyone, but it's okay if they destroy property? My second question is with regards to the funding. I noticed the Justice Minister said that there has been some cost to the state in terms of setting up that temporary facility in Messina. Can you give us a number as to how much has been spent? Thank you.
Thank you.
Veronica Mafadi here from Newsroom Africa. I think for me, it's just riding on or piggybacking from what my colleagues have raised in regards to the police. I remember the acting police minister in our last meeting mentioned the fact that there wasn't a heavy-handedness from police. Are we now balancing the fear of police retaliating, and therefore we allow these groups to do what they do in full view of police? The next question I have is perhaps maybe just over the last few months, we've seen these mushrooming of these particular civil society groups. I just want to know who watches over these groups. What constitutes a civil society organization? Particularly the fact that one of the big questions has always been who's funding them, where do they declare their funding, and how do we know that they are working in the best interests of the country? Are you seemingly just allowed to do what you do and simply say, well, I'm a civil society organization?
Thank you very much. The last hand was, yeah. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ireti Bakari Yusuf. I'm from Nigeria Info. I have two questions, if that's okay. My first question is to the Minister of Justice. Hello, Minister. There are 4 Nigerians whom Nigeria is still asking for updates from. Emeka Charles Irekbua, who was killed by Tiswani Metro Police on the 28th of June 2026 in Sunnyside, Pretoria. Number 2 is Musa Yunana Joe, shot dead by suspected criminals outside his shop on the 28th of June 2026 in Mopalanga. Wisdom Lotana Okori, indigenous of the state, brutally murdered in his residence by criminals on the 9th of May 2026. In addition to that, I would also like to get an update there are a list of 87 extrajudicial killings of Nigerians, which date back to 2022, all of which have been sent to DERCO, yet no action has been taken, no justice or any update has been received. So if you could answer that. My second question then is to the Minister of the Presidency. Dear Minister, last week, my Minister of Foreign Affairs asked for compensation and said South Africa should pay compensation to Nigerians who had to abandon their businesses in SA as a result of the threats from xenophobia, Afrophobic minority of this country. In your response, you spoke to the compensation, and quite rightly, you said compensation should be sought in the correct manner or through the right channel. But you also went on to say Nigerians should also show us where the drugs are. Madam Minister, is that something that should be coming out of your mouth as a representative of the president of this sovereign country? Is that something that a minister should be saying at a time when South Africa is isolated? Is that something you should be saying at this very volatile time when everybody is trying to find a way for peace? But then you responded to Senator Shehu Sani, who wrote on Twitter and put your picture there. You then went on to respond and double down. You said, I did not stutter. Madam, perhaps you can give us stats on the number of Nigerians that are in South African prisons for drugs, or how many drug dens you have been informed of. And I will also ask, would you like to actually apologize to the Nigerian people at this particular moment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, who will then invite the responses. We'll start first with the question. questions that were directed to Professor Kachalia.
Greetings to my colleagues and to everyone present. There were a number of questions around the same theme, so I'll address them collectively, if you don't mind, concerning policing of vigilante activity. We had a very clear message to our people in the run-up to June the 30th, which was that we will respect the right, constitutional right to freedom of assembly. And second, that we expected all citizens and non-citizens in the country to observe the law because we are a country of laws. In that moment on June the 30th, I have to say that I was very pleased with the fact that the police demonstrated their ability to mobilize across the country to maintain safety and security. And at the same time that there were hardly any incidents that I'm aware of confrontation between the police and those who are exercising their rights to freedom of assembly. That's an important achievement to value and to recognize. Restraint on the part of the police service, exercising their responsibilities within the framework of the Constitution. We have had cases in our recent history and in our past where the police use their powers against the citizens of the country, resulting in fatalities and serious injuries. The fact that that didn't happen also as a result of the leadership that was provided by the government to the law enforcement agencies is something that I'm very proud of. We have also made it clear that we expect our citizens who are expressing their grievances and their concerns to act in accordance with the law. And that all forms of criminality is unacceptable. After the 30th, we have seen fewer marches with less numbers and some decentralized criminal activity in the form of vigilantism. I've made it very clear to the police that where such information is available, and Mr. Kubai made it very clear in the statement that was issued today, we call on our citizens to provide information. Where such information is provided, the police have a duty to implement the law, to arrest, and where appropriate, to bring people to court. This kind of vigilante activity is much more difficult to police. It's often spontaneous, very difficult to predict, and it occurs on a decentralized basis. So while we have a commitment to ensure that the law is enforced, enforcement of the law will not always be perfect. But I'm giving you this commitment, this clear commitment, echoing what was stated in the statement that was read out by Minister Kubai, that our message to our people is very clear, that that kind of vigilante activity is not acceptable because only the state has the responsibility to enforce our laws. We can't be clearer and more emphatic on that question than we have been. So I expect in the weeks ahead, in the run-up to the elections, some forms of unlawful behavior to continue, but the police will act. They have a clear responsibility to do so, and the message from the ministry has also been clear and emphatic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for your questions and answers. Let me respond to the colleague from Nigeria. Firstly, there isn't any formal, I hope you can listen because I see somebody's disrupting and she has asked questions for us to answer. If you would like to confirm, we've checked with DECO, they do not have such correspondence. So there isn't anything formally communicated, nothing. So we have verified. Secondly, I don't think Minister Nchabeni needs to issue any apology because when she stood and spoke as a minister, she was speaking on behalf of South Africans, giving feedback on some of the issues. Let's start with the issue of payments claiming. And her context was that you can't provide compensation when a person cannot provide legal basis of acquiring the assets. That was what she said. No legal basis of acquiring of assets. Actually, I'm responsible as the minister for 2 entities in justice that actually recover assets as proceeds of crime. If you are here in the country illegally and you've acquired assets, those are classified under proceeds of crime because in terms of a legal standing, you shouldn't have. So they fall under asset forfeiture unit, and they go into CARA. We use that money to actually fight crime and support victims in this country. It's within our laws. So what we stand and speak on as ministers is on the basis of South African laws.
But what she said wasn't true. Sorry.
Maybe that's allow the minister
No, my dear. One thing, what is going to help us first is respect for each other. Respect for the office that we occupy, because we are ministers of the state. I don't think there's any South African journalist or any South African citizen that will disrespect your sitting minister or a government official. It's not done, and it must never be done. So I thought I should literally say that. And I deliberately took this opportunity to clarify as the chair of the IMC, because the work that we do, it's in multifaceted approach. One, in terms of law enforcement, in terms of fighting crime and corruption. Fortunately, I'm also the chair of JCPS, which is a crime justice cluster that involves all other departments. So I want to reiterate as South African government that currently we do not have, once we have a legal basis or a document that is submitted to us, we'll definitely appropriately respond to anyone. But I want to urge, sitting here, since that you are saying you flew here, that it doesn't help for all countries to attack South Africa unwarranted. We will have to defend ourselves as a country and defend South Africans as their elected representatives. We have that obligation as ministers. So we want to urge, as I said, if you remember our first, I don't know if you've started to follow us, our first media briefing on the 14th, we reflected that in our Lindela repatriation center, we gave a number of Nigerian nationals that the embassy was not confirming their departure. Because they've been sitting there for more months after completing sentences in our prison. It's a record, and we want to appreciate the embassy for responding after our visit to Lindela. Because after that, there were 2 countries that we raised as a concern, and that was raised through DECO, formally in writing previously, and we then announced that we've got this number of nationals. There were 2 countries that we're battling with, that they were not arriving at Lindela, because for us to be able to deport them, those individuals, after their sentences, is that their country of origin must confirm their nationality. And we were not getting cooperation in that regard. So we want to appreciate that cooperation we have received, and we are continuing with the deportation. And all other matters will be dealt with through diplomatic channel. Minister Lamola, as our chief diplomat, will be able to engage with his counterpart, the embassy, on any other matter. Should there be a complaint from the Nigerian government against South Africa, we will be gladly to respond through the appropriate channel. I do not think that the SPET are helpful to the African continent, nor our bilateral relations. So that's what I want to say in that regard. Then in relation, I think Minister of Police has responded to the issue of arrests. I'm not responsible in terms of the law for where people, because when people have been killed, the round will be opened again. How we conduct our media briefings is that we open the round, everybody asks, then answers. Please don't be disruptive to our media briefing. There's procedure that the chair does. No, they will call for the hand when I'm done. I'm going to appeal to you again to respect me as the Minister of the Republic of South Africa. Please. You are here to interact with us. Please, we are appealing to you. So, the chair of the session will call another round of questions where you can take your more questions. We are currently answering. Now, when you disrupt us while we are answering your question, it's not helpful at all. And I want to reiterate, we appeal because South Africa has not, and it's not actually in this point. Any attacks or anything has not been done, sanctioned by this government. Secondly, is that when anyone has been killed, whether they are South Africans or non-South Africans, the police does investigation. We actually have a very strong justice system where investigations are done, where people are arrested, and therefore people then are prosecuted and do serve sentences. Our judiciary in this country is independent, doesn't get influenced by politicians, doesn't get influenced by those who have power or even money. So you can be rest assured when matters appear before our judiciary, they're evaluated and they are dealt with independently and objectively, and irrespective of anyone, of their country of origin or their nationality. We deal with those. And secondly, is that anyone who commits crime, that's what we emphasize, law enforcement management in this country has to be respected across. Now, those individuals, the Embassy of Nigeria does know if they are requesting for updates, they are able to submit through DECO and request for those updates through the Minister of DECO to the Minister of Police. And if that matter is in a court, then I would provide update with the prosecuting authority. Now, with all the matters that we have provided for, we were asked by Minister of Lamola, who received from many countries about incidences, in some instances, incidences that never happened. For example, there was a case that somebody has been killed on the 30th of June. And we went out as the South African government to confirm that the 30th of June, we had no fatality. We had to issue a statement. So that's why we are urging that let's utilize the correct channels to be able to deal with information, verification, updates of incidences that we want reports on. And we'll do the same because even ourselves do the same in that regard. So that's the issue. On the issues Lindile asked about fundings, Lindile, what we have taken as a decision as the IMC is that the departments must source money from their own budgets. The IMC doesn't look at the budget. Currently, where we are going to have to engage in a budget conversation, it's with regards to the borderline program that I spoke about. But the Minister of Home Affairs and the Minister of Public Works will be able to share individually. For example, I would share in terms of whether we've had additional costs that relates to the courts and how we've been able to fund that. And the Minister of Home Affairs will share how they've been able to fund. But once we are done overall, because in terms of some of these things is work in progress. So we don't want to be giving to say this department has said to us, this is amount, and tomorrow you find that money is different. So we want to do major work and then we'll be able to. With regards to the TRPC, once we shut it down, then we'll say what it cost us to run that center overall. I hope that can be accepted in terms of the work. Maybe just to add to Minister of Police matter with the Vigilante group. We did get complaints as members of the IMC about people who were moving at night to do door-to-door. Out of that, an intervention was done requesting, that's what I spoke about, the meeting with the CPF. Because remember, as IMC, we might not be everywhere. So what we did then, we asked that the Department of Subs deals with this. And out of that, the minister then convened meetings. You'd remember, in every community where there's a police station, the police station has community policing forum. And that is a mechanism that we wanted to use, or we have identified to use, to monitor where these activities are so that they can deposit them directly to the operations in terms of the prof joints and the net joints for action to be taken. We've noted, as Minister says, we've noted these complaints about the police company. We have addressed it with net joints to ensure that work is being done in that regard. We'll go back again, following the feedback that we are getting. As we are saying, it's raised by the colleague from Al Jazeera and many of you. It's work in progress, but we are requesting that let's work together because the IMC will not be everywhere. Police officers, somebody asked, where do we report police officers? IPIT is there as an institution that oversight the work of the police. Where there's complaints about police, we lodge them with IPIT. That's the appropriate process of conduct of a police and all that. But we're requesting partnership in this regard with communities, with ourselves, and the Communities Policing Forum, where you'd be able to report to us and deposit this information so that we can act. It would be good when it happens that you tell us immediately so that we can send people to go and intervene in that area. And also if there are police that are found to be doing wrong things so that themselves can be brought to account. Thanks, Chairperson of the session.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, let me put the ground rules. I recognized the names as chairing here. And I clarify that you raise your hand, I note you and recognize you, you ask your question. When the ministers respond, note their response. Then we are going to go for follow-up questions. Then is then that you then raise what has been raised. I hope we agree on that one. Thank you very much. Let me invite further hands in the House. I note your hand. I note your hand. I note your hand. I note your hand. Then I'm recognizing the hands in that order. Let me start here.
Good afternoon. My name is Nzebu. I'm with the SAC. Ministers, I've seen that there are over 53,000 people that have been processed for deportation. And if you look at the number, has there been any sort of engagement on your part together with your counterparts or peers from the African continent or from the countries where these people are coming from? Are they helping you to alleviate the problem that South Africans are seemingly complaining about? And when it comes to the money that is spent, has government maybe committed any money in terms of helping those countries that are failing to assist their residents out of the country? Is there any commitment on the part of government to help those countries that are failing to help their citizens out of the country?
Thank you very much.
Mr. William, I'm just following up on my question that I had asked earlier in regards to civil society organizations. Just that pertinent one about who watches over these groups, how do they declare their funding, and really just the establishment of these particular groups.
Thank you very much. We'll know that will come. Thank you.
Madam Minister, thank you, Madam Minister of Justice. Thank you for your clarification. However, that's not what I was talking about. If you remember, I actually acknowledged that her response to the compensation request was okay. I wasn't talking about that. I will read her quote to you, which is why I brought it up. Quote by Minister of the Presidency of South Africa. We'll be interested to know where the drug dens of Nigerians are so they can show us where they've been holding the drugs so that we can claim the drugs in South Africa quite urgently. Madam Minister of Justice, that is a quote directly, and that quote was made by your colleague a week ago at some briefing. I can't remember which one it was in particular. And again, I have to reiterate, given the close relationship with our two countries, given the sensitivity of the time right now, given the fact that everybody, and I believe everybody in this room and on that panel, is doing their very best to douse the tensions, given the work that you, Madam Minister of Justice, has done to actually douse the tension. I remember seeing your press conference about South African artists having their work cancelled, being booked abroad and being cancelled, and trying to calm everybody down. Given all of that, indeed, given that President Ramaphosa has also done his best to douse tensions. Again, I will come back to Madam Minister of Justice and Minister of Presidency. Do you think the statement you made, and if you want me to read it again, I will, is helpful to your country, to your president, to the works that your colleagues have been doing, indeed to the works that everybody here has been doing, to the works that the NGO have been doing? I interviewed Mr. Baloy a week ago, in June when I was here. The good work that he's been doing, and indeed the work everybody has been doing to ensure that we find a collaborative way beyond this moment. Do you think making statements like that is smart? And again, I ask, would you like to apologize to Nigerians? Because I'm a Nigerian sitting in front of you, and I can assure you that I don't do drugs. Neither does my father, neither do my friends, neither, in fact, the vast majority of Nigerians here are doctors. Let me finish, please. I've asked the question, but I have to say this: Nigerians are doctors, Nigerians are immigration lawyers, Nigerians do all sorts of other things. But you chose to talk about drugs. Why?
Thank you very much. There was a hearing from Al Jazeera.
So one of my questions that I really feel I need answered is, when there has been immigration deadlines for migrants, for people outside South Africa that are working here illegally or legally, when there's been deadlines before, it's been extended. Under the current circumstances, why is there not an amnesty period? Would this not help people to get the papers, to get what they need, and have a break from all of this? Would this not be a responsible move from the South African government to give people an amnesty? And just lastly, the reason I ask this is because so many people that we have spoken to even though we're not the authority on this, so many people we have spoken to are saying that it's so difficult to get papers because of corruption, because of maladministration. So can there not be an amnesty period? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we will then allow the members of the IMC to. From there on, we'll then go to the online questions, those who have joined us virtually, and we have quite a lot of them. Thank you very much.
Let me start with the issue Veronica raised about the civil society. Currently, in terms of the law, civil society that are operating in the country are expected to register as non-profit organization, for example, under social development. Annually, they must declare their statements to be able to report that. You'd recall that one of the areas that we had identified as cabinet is the threshold of civil society in the country as under the work that we are doing on FATF. And that legislation and process is currently in cabinet, in parliament for amendment of those clauses so that we can improve the threshold, we can request transparency of funding and interrogate in that way. It is an area that has been flagged in the country as part of law enforcement and when we deal with issues of organized crime. So it's work in progress. Once it's done, we will be able to, so the requirements will change in terms of the threshold of reporting and annual disclosures and what they can receive. The second area I want to respond to is the Al Jazeera issue. There isn't no legal basis to provide an amnesty. So we operate within the Constitution and the law. So the law says, as you appear, you arrive. When an asylum has applied in the country and they are in the process, they don't get deported. We verify. We only deport once we have confirmed that we decline, and then they leave. Initially, they would do the reapplication while they are here. But once you are here, you are supposed to have a passport. You are supposed to have legal documents. And we find you not to have legal documents. Then you are supposed to be deported. There isn't any amnesty that can appear. So there's asylum and refugee status seeking, and there are particular conditions why an individual can be an asylum, why an individual can be a refugee in the country. It's not everybody. Majority of the countries that we're looking at do not have a basis for even applying for asylum or refugee. And therefore, they shouldn't be here illegally. They must have their papers. One of the experiences as we deal with this work is that countries that we have given as a country, as South Africa, based on our bilateral relations, and I'm a former minister of tourism, so I would have championed this very well, around the entry, visa entry, non-visa entry for 90 days. So majority of them overstay their days. Others would be here properly with visas. Their visa will expire, and then they will leave. For example, if you watched last week, those who were arrested in Western Area appearing before Western Area Magistrate Court, almost everybody who was appearing there, they were asked if they have any documentation, and they said they don't have. Majority of those that we have processed, almost everybody that we have processed, as we take their fingerprints, they have not had any documentation. So they are in the country illegally, and they do not have refugee status, no application in terms of refuge. If you remember when we dealt with the people who were outside Che Guevara in KwaZulu-Natal, we did confirm that those who were there were people who were asylum seekers and refugees. We never deported them. We never repatriated the repatriation. I must not use repatriation and repatriation interchangeably. We never repatriated them because they had a legal standing. And some of them, as we looked, I remember about 114 of them, they were in the process of application. So their application status was not yet declined nor approved, but we didn't act on them because within the law, they're legal in the country. So that's what we want to state in terms of the issue. The other issue I want to respond to, as I said, Minister Ntshabeni is not going to issue an apology. because sitting here as the chair of the IMC, I have listened to her. And we can debate, we can argue that this is what needs to be done. And as I said, if Nigerian government does feel that South African minister has done something wrong, the appropriate channel is for that to be done through DECO, through the diplomatic channels, and that shall be responded within those channels. I do not think it's appropriate for the confrontation at this point. Minister Nchabeni never said all Nigerians are drug dealers in the statement. Never. There's no way she says that. So it can be that the insinuation is that she said Nigerians are drug dealers. She didn't say that. She spoke about drug dens, and my explanation is that if you listen to the marchers, you listen to the South Africans, that's what they have given us as feedback to say, ministers, please deal, go to Hillbrow, go to Sunnyside. We do have this challenge of drug dens that are there. It is South Africans who are saying to us, they are run, some of them are run by Nigerians. And Minister Nchabeni was explaining the feedback that we have received from South Africans. Not that it is the belief that Nigerians, all Nigerians that are here are drug dealing. That's not what she said. And I don't think a demand from an apology from here, it's warranted, nor is it appropriate. Thank you.
There were also follow-up questions to the Minister of Police, Minister Kachalia, CA. I saw somewhere it was not spelled correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Beloy. I also want to engage in a conversation with the journalist from Al Jazeera and the journalist from Nigeria. We have a crisis in this country that has accumulated over time, arising out of illegal immigration. This is an issue being raised by South African people, by our citizens. What is the responsibility of a democratic elected government? The first responsibility, it's to listen and respond to the issues being raised by our people. You ask, in the midst of this crisis, why we are not responding, we are not announcing a general amnesty. Clearly, you haven't ever had the responsibility to govern a country. The government didn't set the deadline. That deadline was announced by civil society groups. The government made it very clear in our response that there is no such deadline. But we are responding to the concerns raised by our people as detailed, substantially detailed in the response of the IMC communicated by the chair of the IMC. And we're going to do that. We have to do that. That's our duty, our responsibility. People should not be in this country illegally. And for you to point out that there are weaknesses in the migration system, which we are trying to strengthen, only strengthens the case for the government's comprehensive response. We should not be represented as some kind of tyranny, a dictatorial government that is responding in an uncaring way. In fact, that comprehensive plan demonstrates that we are saying to our people, in the midst of this crisis, we understand your anger, but we want you to adhere to the basic morality embodied in our Constitution, to the rule of law. That has been the message of this government. I cannot accept the implication, the implied criticism in your question. Now, to the Nigerian journalist, thank you for your questions. And I can also hear your anger. You referred to 4 cases. I encourage you to give me that information and I will follow it up. But the purpose of your question was to suggest that Nigerians are a special category of people who are being victimized in South Africa by virtue of their nationality. Failing to distinguish between issues of illegal immigration and issues of criminality. Am I correct? These are cases that you mentioned in which you are saying Nigerians were the victims of crime. Well, you'll have your opportunity again. That I understood your question. I don't think I was mistaken. Your question was, there are 4 cases in which Nigerians, you have that information, you're saying we haven't acted, and these are 4 cases in which Nigerians, because they are Nigerians, have been the victims of criminality. Now, if that is the case, I'm saying you're conflating issues of illegal immigration with issues of criminality, and that you shouldn't be making that reductive argument. Okay? But I can indicate to you that we have a problem like your country. We have a problem of criminality. We don't look at the nationality of the victim. So I think that insinuation was improper. Now, you're also critical of one of the ministers, the minister in the presidency on this platform, because you say quite rightly that this is a sensitive moment and that we should all be acting in a responsible way to reduce the tensions. That is a two-way street. There is a lot of misinformation and inflammatory rhetoric being directed at this government. We need to have a respectful conversation with our partners, with our sister countries on the African continent, about the terms of migration into what is a sovereign territory of South Africa. We have to be able to have that conversation. South Africa was the last country on our continent to achieve its independence as a sovereign territory of the South African people that has a commitment to Pan-African unity. The decolonization project on our continent produced independent nation states, starting with Ghana in 1957. What does it mean to have a continent made up of sovereign states that also form part of the Organization of African Unity? We need to be able to have that conversation in order to ensure that our continent is united, that it prospers, that our countries are well governed, and that they are all committed to the well-being of their own peoples. That is what we, the last country on the African continent to be liberated, to achieve its independence, that's the conversation we are asking to have with you. So if you say you want to have a respectful conversation, you want to reduce the tensions, I agree with you. But that's a two-way street. We have seen a lot of inflammatory rhetoric on social media, and I would not exclude the political leadership of some countries. And I understand their concerns as well. So please convey the message to your citizens and to your leaders as well, that that is the sentiment that you experienced in South Africa. We, in this country, we supported all the teams, African teams in the World Cup. We're not confused about our identity and where we stand on important matters concerning our mutual interest. Thank you.
Let me invite the minister in the presidency, Minister Chavele.
Thank you, Brother Willie. There were two questions that were raised of what are we doing to engage with the missions or home countries to alleviate the problem of illegal immigration. For us as government, this is beyond now the process of the repatriation and also the deportations and the continuous challenge that we're dealing with. When we were doing the cabinet, post-cabinet briefing, we indicated that cabinet for almost over a year, when we were discussing before 2024 elections, when we were discussing the draft white paper on immigration, refugee protection and asylum seekers. And also when we were dealing with the revised white paper on immigration, refugee protection and asylum seekers. And also when we're dealing with the National Intelligence Estimate, and you'll recall that in the previous briefing, we also indicated the issue of illegal immigration has been raised very high in the National Intelligence Estimate. And our approach was, as Minister Kubai has indicated, that majority of the countries that we are finding their nationals or citizens in the country illegally do not even qualify to apply for either refugee or asylum status in this country. We indicated that we discussed the pull and the push factors for the illegal immigration into South Africa. It's part of the issues that Minister Kachalia has just referred to now, of the instability that makes the government not being able to protect their own nationals. That's why part of the challenge that we've had is people who do not even have a passport to start with, not that they've expired, and that because even the cost of the documentation, the cost is not on the South African side, the cost of the documentation, it's in their own countries applying for that documentation. We then also concluded that what is important, and it's our commitment, both as the current chairperson of SADC, as an active member of the AU, as the current chairperson of SACU, that we are committed to the Agenda 2063 of the AU of silencing the guns for the development, for the economic development of Africa. And our priority is saying Africa, a better Africa and a better world. And that means all of us as governments, we must commit to ensure conditions that allow economic development. In that briefing, we indicated, I think it was the the IMC briefing, we indicated that as South Africa, we're actively involved in the development projects, industrialization projects in Angola, in the Lobito corridor. We are also actively involved in the projects in Mozambique, and our companies have invested, South African companies, Sasol has invested big time. The number of South African companies that have invested in the African continent as part of that commitment. We are the first signatory, we are part of the first signatories on the African Continental Free Trade Area, because we have a commitment to industrialize Africa, because if we industrialize and develop together, the pull factors to South Africa will not take place. And our commitment, that's why we even in the members of SACU, when there was a debate around SACU, we worked on the reimagined SACU. We recently had the SACU summit in Cape Town, I think 2 weeks ago. And part of that commitment is the industrialization of the SACU areas, which is the Southern African Customs Union, which is amongst the largest customs union. And also in SADC, which we are hosting the summit now in August, and we'll host another one next year in August in South Africa again as the longest serving chairperson of SADC. Our theme is focused on the industrialization of the Southern Africa. And we continue to mobilize our companies to invest within the region and within the continent to make sure that the development and the industrialization of the region and the continent is at a fast pace. It's for that reason that we also we have committed to fight against diseases. We are the only country in the continent that has contributed money in millions of US dollars in the fight against the Ebola disease, pandemic that has come through. We remain the champion for a healthy Africa at the EAU, because we are committed to make sure that Africa develops and Africa is free of disease and Africa can focus on the industrialization, like Minister Kachalia has said. But all of us as governments within the AU, who are members of the AU, we need to commit to ensure conditions in our own countries that allow political stability, political certainty, and conducive conditions for economic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, let me invite now questions online. I'm not sure, maybe let's take the first 10. I see we have massive questions. I'm not sure.
We have about 16 online questions. I'll start with the first 10. Carol Payton from News 24 has questions related to vigilante as well. There have been numerous instances where the SAPS attempts march and march door-to-door campaigns and arrests undocumented migrants. In your view, is this correct? Why is the SAPS not preventing the door-to-door campaigns? They appear to be facilitating it. The instances where the police stand by and watch door-to-door operations take place at the advertised marches of protesters. It is not isolated and hidden away. This gives the impression that the police misunderstand their role. Shannon Merritt from Kasi, DC Africa, has 3 questions. What's the legal status of children born in South Africa from parents with blocked IDs? Do these children qualify to attend schools, go to hospitals, and receive social grants while parents' IDs are blocked or cancelled? What will happen to children of parents that get deported with immediate effect? Will they be declared child-headed houses or children without any caregivers and parents? Njumi Somlilo from China Daily. We are seeing an increase in attacks on migrants during marches. We have seen those marching break into houses, drag out foreigners, and take them to the police cars. The latest happened in Alexandra. We have seen marchers beating vendors, looting, evicting foreign sponsor shop owners. This happens in the presence of police, and they don't act. What is your comment on that? Kwena Mashale, a journalist from Soweto. This question is for Minister Dubai. There have been reports of child displacement, where children are separated from their families. This has reportedly resulted in some children boarding the wrong buses and arriving in Mozambique, while their parents are in Zimbabwe or in a bus to Malawi. Has the committee noted such cases? If so, how is the department addressing this issue? This question is for Minister Schreiber or Minister Dubai. There are reports of Zimbabwean exemption permit ZEP holders facing harassment within communities, creating an atmosphere of fear. Many parents are allegedly anxious about their children particularly matric pupils preparing for exams during the holidays, who are subjected to harassment. Consequently, some parents are withdrawing their children from schools to take them back to Zimbabwe. Does the ZEP extend to children, or do children of ZEP holders require independent study visas? Is the committee looking into the safety concerns of foreign nationals whose children are due to return to school in a few weeks? Will the committee be collaborating with the Department of Basic Education regarding this matter? That is Gwena Mashale from Soweto. I'll pause here from the director.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for the questions. We wanted to read the questions on the record. Some of the questions that have been read, I think the members of the IMC have already responded to them. So we wanted them to be on the record. And I'm not sure if there are others that might want to be responded to. Here there are questions about Home Affairs. We invite the Director General Makode from Home Affairs to respond to some of the questions. I see the burning hands in the house. I'll come back.
Thank you very much, Brawili, and good morning again to colleagues from the media. I think maybe ministers, let me start with the question on the ZEP. And I thought colleagues from the media would be familiar with this matter.
Is already pronounced on this matter, following a decision by the Supreme Court. Now, the ConCourt remitted the matter of the ZEP back to the Department of Home Affairs. So that's back to the Minister of Home Affairs and the Director General. What then are we supposed to do? On the ZEP, the ConCourt directed that the minister must conduct what is known as a fair and proper public consultation process on the ZEP. We have been on that process. We've been to all the provinces to solicit inputs from all stakeholders. And once we have consolidated those inputs, therefore, that will then be taken by the Minister of Home Affairs to Cabinet for consideration. And that's where we are with regards to that. Just by way of numbers, Brawidi, if you look at the entire population of the ZEP holders, it's about 178,763. So that ConCourt decision basically indicates that they remain legal in the country by virtue of that ConCourt decisions. Now, a lot of them have been applying for what is known as waiver applications. About 93,000 of those, 93,702 have been approved or considered by the minister. But so far, there are also ZEPs that are now applying for what the minister referred to earlier on, mainstream visas. We have 17 visa categories and about 46,736 of Zimbabwean ZEP holders that have applied for these permits. Now, there was also a question that was raised similarly with regards to what then happens with regards to the status of them in the country. And that's what Minister or Professor Kachale was referring to, that those that are in the country legally are protected by the laws of the Republic of South Africa. Now, you also make mention of ZEP children. And remember, the children take the status of the parents in terms of our laws. So if they're an asylum seeker or a refugee, therefore they take the same status of the parent until they reach a particular age 16. Then they can then apply on their own for other permits. Now, just to remind colleagues that in 2019, Judge Mbenenge made a ruling. It's called the Phakamisa judgment, which included the Center for Child Law and Phakamisa High School and a number of others. Now, if you look at that judgment very carefully, it basically says, irrespective of the status of the learner. They have access to education. Therefore, no principal can send them away. Now, Minister Mutseha, when she was Minister of Basic Education, followed that up with a circular that was issued on the 10th of February 2020, affirming the court's decision. And therefore, there's no principal who can turn away any child from a school based on the fact that they don't have that status. That's with regards to that. I think on the amnesty, Minister, Professor Kachalia has responded to that. Those are the only ones that I think I can deal with, except the two on children that might be leaving the country without their parents. That's incorrect, ministers. We have social development right at the center, at the temporary repatriation center. There were two cases that were reported that I was personally involved with. The two minors were from Zimbabwe and their mom was across. And therefore social development intervened and the mom was then recalled by the embassy and our own team of social development officials. They were then called back to come and collect the children once they have been processed. And then of course, the other one relates to someone who was staying with a Malawian national. They've got 3 children together, but she's a South African. There are also ministers, undocumented South Africans that do not have any documentation. Neither did the mother and the 3 children have any documentation, and therefore social development intervened. They are liaising with the social development colleagues in the province. In the meantime, the mom and the children were taken to a place of safety in Musina while we await that process. So it's incorrect that wrong children are taken through to wrong buses. But remember, at the center, we have representatives from the consular support that is provided by Zimbabwe, consular support that is provided by Malawi. Before anyone boards that bus, and we have been able to commission more than 823 buses, everyone has to be verified. That's what the minister was referring to in the body receipt. So there's a passenger manifest, and in the documentation that the embassy issues, it indicates this is such and such a passenger with the following children. And interviews are conducted at the site by the embassy officials. So I'll be very interested in these cases, Prawili. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The government of South Africa is comprehensively responding to issues related to migration. The government of South Africa is comprehensively updating the nation and everyone on the implementation of the 5-point plan. Hence, you see us allowing all the questions that are here. Minister?
Oh, I thought you were closing. Okay. No, it's fine. There was just to, let me just go because I'm trying to see some of this. Unless if you've not placed them on record, because we're trying. DG Makode has responded to how we've been managing, and I want to refer and emphasize there's not been, because if we start removing children, we don't treat them correctly, it means we are violating human rights laws. It's not correct. We've been compliant, and that's why we highlighted the bodies, UN bodies. We have highlighted the NGOs on the side that have been monitoring our work, and that's why we could explain what we are doing. The issue of, there was a question that relates to the case of Mr. Kuma extradition. We will update once the papers have been received by the Department of Justice, because they have to go to court to confirm extradition. We must receive an extradition request from Britain, and then once it's done, it's processed through NPA, and then it comes to the minister. Once that is done, it's confirmed by the court, and the person can be placed. Minister signs for Interpol to take the person. So that's the process that we'll work on in terms of that process. I think we'll update once that is done. The issues around communities we verified, we've answered. I don't think there's anything. Then there's questions, please let's focus on migration. Let's not deal with side issues. Brawili, I remember on Friday, I was in another briefing and then they started asking me about migration. So I said, can they allow me not to deal with the work of moonlighting as a migration officer? So even here, I would like us to focus. DG, there's an issue about the SIU work. Oh, he's answered it. Oh, they've not placed them. That's why I'm ready to go. Okay, let me allow them to place those. Let them place everything so that we can finish.
No, thank you very much, Chair. With your direction, I will request that the last 6 questions be read on the record. Then, Veronica, I saw your hand. I will give you the last. Then from there, I'll then request the members of the IMC to respond and also to bring the press briefing to a close.
Thank you, sir. Shani from Sowetan has 3 more questions. This question is for the Minister of Police. Committee members have raised concerns that the 600 million spent by the SAPS for the June 30th demonstrations was an excessive waste of public funds while crime continues to plague communities. Many argue these resources could have been better directed towards other present causes. Was this funding necessary to police for the June 30th demonstrations? Furthermore, can the Minister provide a detailed breakdown of exactly how these funds were utilized? In the case of Ndodana Khanyisi Chuma, how long is the extradition process expected to take? Additionally, is he still scheduled? Also linked to the Chuma case, has SAPS established why Chuma traveled to South Africa instead of Zimbabwe, as initially anticipated by UK authorities? Brayden from Network 24, what is the current proposed budget for the borderline workstream? Does this budget include the construction of a border wall or security fence or any other permanent border infrastructure? To the Minister of Police, do you believe the approximately 600 million spent on policing operations on 30 June represented value for money? Additionally, what were the primary cost drivers of this expenditure, and how was the budget allocated across this operation? The President has extended the Mandela Commission until November. What is the budgeted cost of this extension? And lastly, Sindiso Mhlabeti from Gauteng Network. Vetting failure. The SIU found 4 officials earning less than 25,000 Rand a month, received 16.3 million in direct deposit. The question is, has the Department of Home Affairs made vetting of all employees mandatory? And how did such wealth accumulation go undetected for years? Has the Department of Home Affairs increased its capacity beyond the initial 800 staff members assigned to monitor immigration-related matters across the country and verify immigration documentation? Those are all of the questions.
Thank you very much. I can see the risk of a long press briefing moving away from the migration. However, we have read them on the record. Allow me, Chair, just to take just one hand aside, and I think it will be the last round. Let me look. Okay.
I'm so sorry, ministers. Monica Mofadia from Inter-Ministerial Africa. I know we're trying to end this briefing, but I think it's a question that I've never had an opportunity to ask. And that is, why does South Africa appear to attract a different level of criticism when it comes to doing what every other country does in terms of immigration, particularly the double standard? And I am speaking to the current atmosphere in this room and what was raised by my Nigerian counterparts. I just want to understand, why is it seems that South Africa is fairly judged when it comes to these immigration processes? I heard Minister Kachalia speaking about the conversation that needs to be had, but also this government speaking about inflammatory misinformation that is seemingly even perpetuated in a briefing.
Thank you very much. South Africa is a very democratic country. That means
of police, and I think Minister, you'll be rounding up on all the security, on all the police issues now.
So thank you, Monica, for that question, but your Nigerian colleague has left. Unfortunately, I don't think she had the opportunity to hear your question. There have been a lot of questions about the cost of police action on June the 30th. It's very interesting. You know, I'm hearing the conversation that we had at the last press conference was about what needs to be done or not done to deal with what appeared to be a looming threat of a violent shutdown. And today the conversation, most of the questions have been about concerns about strengthening law enforcement, about concerns about the ongoing challenges we face with respect to law enforcement, dealing with vigilante activity and so forth. The activities of various groups that may be fanning the flames. Just an interesting switch in the conversation that I noticed. Law enforcement costs money. That was the point I was making to the country. Our first responsibility in the build-up to June the 30th was to make it very clear that we will not have a repeat of July 21, that we will mobilize the necessary resources on the country, across the country to keep the country safe. Because we are all aware of the costs, financial, human, economic costs of a repeat of what happened, because we were not prepared for July the 21st. Second, the police budget on the basis also of contingencies. So that we are able to meet with every eventuality from a safety point of view. When we have SADC event, we have the resources in the budget, the current budget, to respond. When we have a security threat, we must be able to respond. So no new money was allocated. From the existing budget, we're able to respond. And what is that budget for? When you have a special operation, which is what happened on June the 30th, and we saw sporadic incidents of violence that threatened to get out of hand, you have to call up reservists. You have to pay overtime. You have to accommodate police officers across the country. We don't have accommodation facilities across the country. We have to pay for that. And on the back of this operation, like Operation Shan, we have existing law enforcement initiatives to reduce crime. We are using this mobilization to strengthen our efforts to fight crime including organized crime. And as Minister Shiveni keeps reminding me to remind you, these are intelligence-driven operations. So one of the objectives I'm hoping we're going to achieve in the run-up to the elections, and nobody here will say that we shouldn't be budgeting to ensure that we have a peaceful election. And we've already seen, I think 12 councillors have already been murdered. Must I, as a police minister, sit back and say, well, I'm not going to spend the resources that are required to ensure that those who are killing councillors are investigated, that they brought to book, that our election isn't safe and secure. This last registration event, the head of the Independent Electoral Commission told me a few days ago that that the police operation that they saw was the best ever around the registration weekend, and we've got another one coming up. And in the next 6 months, we're not just thinking about June the 13th. Next 6 months, we are going to keep the country safe as the tensions rise in the country, going to keep the country safe, and we are going to reduce crime by mobilizing the necessary resources. Minister Kubai indicated to you that one of the reasons why we had success on June the 30th was that we mobilized our communities. We mobilized our CPF structures. We mobilized our patrollers from communities who told me that they are going to make sure that they will not have a repeat of June the 21st. And I want to applaud the police for the responsibility with which they kept the country safe. And I want to applaud the marchers for observing the law, for acting with responsibility for the most part. I really appreciated that. That's the way we must do things in our country, including expressing our democratic freedoms. So the money was well spent on June the 30th. What conversation would we have been having had we had a repeat? Now, massive destruction of property, maximum destruction of lives, as we saw on June the 21st, we did not have a repeat. So I think it's time to recognize that the country did well on June the 30th, that our law enforcement agencies did exceptionally well. We had the support of the army, we had the support of the intelligence agencies, and the South African police services demonstrated what they can achieve acting within the framework of our Constitution. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kachalia. Thank you for the questions. We need to indicate that the work that is being done to improve safety and security of the country. And majority of the work that you are not seeing that is linked is the work around what we are doing on organized crime. Even the work that is led, as the Minister Chairperson of the IMC indicated, the work that is led by the GMs of labor and workplace inspections, which are now going to extend to hijacked buildings, supporting bylaw enforcement at municipalities, in particular in the metros of Johannesburg, Tshwane, eThekwini, Gqeberha, and Cape Town, and the other smaller municipalities where we've got hijacked buildings. That work is part of this work. So therefore, the totality of the expenditure that we are dealing with is also improving the safety and security of South Africans. Those of you who have seen the improvements in the city of Johannesburg in terms of the bylaw enforcement with the hijacked buildings and the removal of illegal trading on the streets and the pavements of Johannesburg, you'll notice that. On the issue that about the SIU work at Home Affairs and the vetting, The SIU was commissioned through a presidential proclamation. We started to do investigation as part of our quest, and that's why we've always reiterated the work to deal with corruption, but also to deal with the recurrence and the scourge of illegal immigration has not started now because of the protesters. The work started way before when government, and Minister Kubai said it the previous briefing, that when government does something, we are not acknowledged. It's only when the noise comes from other sectors that you then want to give credit for the work that government has been doing. So that work, SIU received a presidential proclamation, and part of the outcomes is the findings of members of the immigration in Home Affairs who were pocketing a lot monies, though they earn very low salaries. And part of those, some are in the disciplinary processes, some have already been expelled, and the process of recovery of the ill-gotten gains, as Minister Kubai has indicated, of Kara, is already underway. In terms of vetting, because that is the responsibility of the State Security Agency, the vetting, what we have done, as we indicated during our budget vote, we have categorized departments, because previously the focus on senior management and supply chain officials. But now we have categorized critical departments and agencies across the public sector. So it's not limited only in government departments, across the public sector, which means SOCs, means municipalities, provincial and national departments that are critical or that are susceptible to corruption. And then we undertaking vetting on that. As part of that work in Home Affairs, we've already targeted the project management office of Home Affairs. We've targeted a number of categories. We have also increased our own capacity, moving to e-vetting, electronic vetting, so that we can then have sufficient capacity. You know, we are currently vetting the senior management of the police, not only up from brigadier level up, we are also dealing with the metro municipalities. We have started with Ekurhuleni. We are going to Johannesburg, Tshwane, and eThekwini, and the city of Cape Town will be the last one. We are building that, we have that capacity that we're working, and that our vetting includes, we have strengthened the work of vetting, the component of vetting that dealt with lifestyle audits, to make sure that lifestyle audits are then dealt with. And we are no longer doing it, though vetting, the security clearance certificate remains valid for 5 years. Lifestyle audits are annual, so that because we can keep track of the process. And part of the improvements in the vetting outcomes is that if we find you, if we fail you vetting and deny you a security clearance, in terms of the regulations, we are now obliged to report you to law enforcement agencies so that they can then do the investigation for your prosecution. It's part of what we are using, what we call passive intelligence, to strengthen law enforcement in the country. And I need to indicate the one thing, just supporting what Minister Kachalia has indicated. Part of what we are seeing now with the work, with the activities of checking the documentation and non-documentation, we are seeing communities taking that on their own hands. And that's why we've engaged through the president with traditional leaders to make sure that we partner with the National House of Traditional Leaders and the provincial houses of traditional leaders to make sure that citizens do not take the law into their own hands, and they can follow a process that is guaranteed. On the issue around the spaza shops, the Department of Small Business Development continues to register spaza shops, and there are requirements. You'll recall, even when the city of Johannesburg was taken to court about informal traders and micro traders by the SERI group, the city was granted the permission to make sure that everybody who has the relevant papers is in the country, can trade at designated places. The other issues that the municipalities will have to deal with is the issue of spaza shops that are mushrooming all over, which are not necessarily designated. Part of the work that is being done by the IMC includes the work to support environmental health inspectors. As you recall, last year we had to deal with the foodborne poisoning. I'll hand over to the chairperson to close up. Thanks.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for that. I think we confirm that we continue to do the work. We'll do these media briefings as they go. As Minister Kachelia was saying, they are changing in shape as we proceed and form. But I guess this is what we want to communicate to South Africans. The president, when he did the media briefing, he spoke on 5-point plan that he wanted to see government responding to and implementing. And the IMC remains committed in implementing that 5-point plan as instructed by the head of state. We further reiterate that those within the borders of the Republic must be here legally and must respect our laws. We urge all South Africans and all those within our borders, they must desist from conducting illegal and unlawful raids. Only law enforcement agencies can do this. We are urging South Africans to share this information with us so that we can track where the activities are happening and monitor the enforcement of the law as the IMC. There's a point, it's not raised, but I need to clear it. Because there's a misunderstanding of South Africans about citizens' arrest in terms of Criminal Procedure Act. And if we were to do what colleagues or communities are doing, it means if I have a break-in in my house, I will not call police, but I will say I'm doing citizen arrest. The fact that when a break-in my house or a crime is committed on my premises, I go and call police because I'm not a law enforcement agency. And therefore, when an activity has happened, we must call the police must enforce the law. So I want to urge South Africans, please stop the raids. Please stop taking the law in your hands because there shall be consequences. Allow law enforcement agencies to deal with these matters. We have proven that we are dealing with it. Give us space, don't redirect our programs, and allow us to do that work. We reiterate that South Africa is a sovereign state and must be allowed to protect itself and its citizens. Most importantly, South Africa as a sovereign state must be allowed to determine its laws, its policies, and to enforce them. We must not have another state telling us or another citizens of other countries telling us how we must do our laws and how we must enforce them. We are a sovereign state as the Republic. It's a right we have fought for, and it's a right that must be respected. As a state amongst family of nation, it stands within its own powers. We have received feedback from, as the IMC, from the head of state and the IMC and the Minister of DECO, saying that countries, especially in the continent, both heads of states and ministers, supporting us in enforcing our laws and ensuring that we protect the integrity of the Republic. So there's no misunderstanding from governments on the continent in terms of us implementing our laws. From the reports we get from Minister Lamula, and that's why he kept on saying, people are saying they understand that we must enforce our laws, and can our law enforcement agencies be seen enforcing the law? Like we've read out the number of people that have been arrested before our courts. We'll continue to keep the stats in terms of enforcement of the law. But we also say as government, through the head of state and through the Minister of DECO, we've been engaging, we'll continue to engage with our sister countries because migration is not just a South African problem. It's a global problem. And all of us have to work towards managing it. Many countries actually have faced similar challenges like us. Within the continent, going as far back, where there have been countries where send people out, others retaliating, We've seen in global platforms where this has happened, the history is there to narrate for itself. And we want to say, because it's a challenge, and we've said it's a push and pull factor, there are issues that are actually leading for people leaving their countries, being in South Africa, and those who are leaving South Africa being in other countries. And what we need as Africa is to implement Agenda 2063 in ensuring that our continent prospers, there's economic growth on the continent, there's opportunities for younger people on the continent in our countries, but we silence the guns so that those who are fleeing their countries are able to retain themselves within the countries. This is an obligation that we have as leaders of this continent, but also we understand our role and responsibility as South Africa to be able to contribute towards that. That's why we reiterate that refugees who come to South Africa, asylum seekers who come to South Africa, seeking assistance from the Republic, based on our laws, based on our international obligation, we shall be able to support them because it's what we have committed to. And that's why we separate the illegal immigrants from refugees and asylum seekers. What this IMC has been able to do is to identify those areas, and we can confirm the number that we have counted of 53,000, over 53,000 of repatriations and deportation are not asylum seekers, are not refugees. These are people who've been in the Republic illegally. And the law does warrant and require us to do so. We urge all South Africans as we conclude, civil society movements, business, communities, but most importantly, South Africans, our law enforcement agencies, let's continue to work together to manage this migration in the interest of our country, protecting its image, protecting its sovereignty, but most importantly as well, to the interest of South Africa and her people. Thanks, Program Director.
After 2.5 hours of interaction, the government of South Africa is accountable and responsive to the needs of the people. This brings us to the end of this briefing. Thank you very much all for coming. Thank you very much for those who watch from home. Thank you very much also those who listen on the radio. Ministers, thank you very much for the time that you took to demonstrate accountability of the South African government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for challenge.